chat, and it's very laid back conversation. So I'm going to start with, before you came to Lismore, what did you used to do? I heard you were a teacher.
Yes, I was a teacher of deaf children.
Okay.
I had gone straight from Teachers College, where I trained to be an infants teacher in Geelong, in Victoria. And I even had my class, a prep class, which is kindergarten if you're here, a prep class at Mornington Primary School on the peninsula. I was a good student and I was offered that.
Yeah.
And that was really, for an infants teacher, that was like the epitome of the best. But in the time of being offered, or that position becoming a possibility, there was a seat on the bus, one seat on the bus from Teachers College to visit a deaf school in Kew in Melbourne from Geelong. Geelong's a couple of hours away. And my roommate from the hostel was going. And I said, I'd be interested in going. And that day changed my life. Wow. I saw what teachers were doing, teaching speech to profoundly deaf children. I said, I want to do that. So I turned down the position at Mornington and went on student wages for another year, trained full-time as a teacher of the deaf in Kew, in Melbourne, and I had a special interest in teaching speech, because in those days speech therapists, speech pathologists could not go into schools. So it had to be a special teacher with an interest. So I did extra training in my own time to become a speech teacher. So I did that. I went on to lecture at Victoria University and Melbourne University in speech and language development for all children, for children with special needs in the special ed program. And just before we came to Melbourne, I was teaching a group, or individually, preschool deaf children of deaf parents who wanted their own children to not only learn sign language but to learn to speak. Yeah. And that was a special program, never been done before, in a school in the western suburbs of Melbourne. So I was working with the parents and that preschool child on speech and language development. They could sign, but turning that also into spoken language. So that's what I was doing before we came up here. And I was a mother of 2 children.
So you'd had the children there. And you did that for 45 years, is that correct?
Yes, yes,
for 45
yes.
years.
Up here, I changed.
Yes.
Up
so what
here,
year did you come here?
91.
Okay.
So 91. So I've been here, 28 years now. When I came up here, it's a bit like moving to another country. Yeah. My qualifications were not recognised. Wow. My years of experience was not recognised. I applied for a job at the university and they turned me down. And I was doing voluntary work for about 3 months while I had my papers in. And at the end I was able to do some casual teaching, and they asked me if I'd be willing to go to Wilson Park. So for 18 months I was a casual teacher at Wilson Park with teenage kids. I had taught a class of teenage deaf boys way, way back, but this was a group of teenagers with multiple disabilities. I loved it, just loved it. Yeah. So I did that for 18 months, and at the end of 18 months a new position was created here. It had been created but they couldn't fill it, and I didn't know about it. And it was for an itinerant teacher for deaf children to work with Aboriginal children with fluctuating hearing loss. And it was a travelling position all over the North Coast. And I applied and I was the first person to do that. And I did that for 14 years.
Wow.
So, fabulous experience.
So backtracking a little bit, why did you move to this area?
Like most women, my generation, you go where your husband goes.
Okay.
So Ron had been an HR manager with Victorian Transport. So he was in head office in Collins Street. He was dealing with major HR restructures, and he had the opportunity to be restructured himself and take a redundancy. And during that time, he'd been doing his master's in business in tourism, which was an emerging area for academic study. So he applied for 2 jobs, knowing that he was facing a redundancy. One was with Alcoa in Bell Bay, Tasmania, as an HR manager, so continuing on.
Yeah.
And the other was the total life change of a lecturer in tourism at Southern Cross University in Lismore, where we both had to look up Lismore on the map.
Okay.
So he flew up and he had the interview, and they offered him the job, and he rang me from Rex, or the airport, Lismore Council Airport, to say they've offered me the job. What do you think? And I said, I'll wait up for you tonight, because I knew we'll talk about it. And that was it. We talked about it, and I threw in my work, and we moved up here.
When did you join council?
2004.
2004.
Yes.
And you were on council for
12 and a half years. Yes. Yeah.
As a councillor, and
Yeah.
what made you get into local government?
Okay. Look, lots of people. My background apart from my teaching work, and I guess even my teaching work is about social justice and equity. But my background, I'd always only worked part-time since I've had the children, and my other work was always voluntary work. So I had done voluntary work with community transport. I did voluntary work at the library here, and I did voluntary work at the community centre or the neighbourhood centre when it was in Mackenzie Street before the square was expanded.
Yes.
And the council was moving the neighbourhood centre into the old library, which is now where the community gateway is.
Yeah.
They were moving. But one of the services at the library at the time was the needle syringe exchange program. It was a really good relationship. It was downstairs, and drug users, anyone could come and get their syringes exchanged. It was a welcome facility for the neighbourhood centre management, but the council didn't want it at the new library. They said it was unsafe, it would change the ambience of the neighbourhood. They frankly didn't want it. And I was appalled. I went to a council meeting, I saw how council operated, and that got me inspired.
Yeah.
And it just brewed inside me these, I won't say what I thought, making this decision on the basis of not known facts, etc., etc. So it just brewed inside me for a couple of years until I had the opportunity to support other councillors who were going to stand for council. We needed a team of 6. I said, put my name down as number 5 or 6. I don't want to get elected because I couldn't do that job. I really believed I couldn't do that job. So as the time went on, I thought, I'm going to be in the community and people are going to be asking me, what do I think about this issue or that issue? And I'll have no idea. So I suppose I better start going to council meetings.
Yes.
So I started going. I'd sit up the back, open the business paper, read it through, and what I saw appalled me. I saw a councillor who fell asleep. I saw a councillor who opened his business paper on the night and it crackled, so you knew he'd never opened it before. I saw councillors who were asking questions that were in the business paper, the answers were there, that showed me they hadn't read it. And I thought, I could do this better than them. So I went along to my group of 6 and I said, look, I'd like to have a winnable position, 1, 2 or 3. And blow me down, they said, we reckon you'd be good at this, we'll step aside and you can go number 1. So I was number 1 on the ticket and I got elected. It wasn't as easy as that, but
no.
I got elected.
So 12 years later, how did you become mayor?
Okay, well I was
what made you?
Okay, I was elected mayor at the end of my first term. The first term was 4.5 years.
Okay.
Council elections had been postponed, so they were 4.5 years, and towards the end of that, it's normal for most councillors to think, will I stand for mayor?
All right.
So I knew Merv King was retiring. I thought, I reckon I could do this. I'll put my hand up. And I was very lucky because there was progressives on council and the conservatives on council. The progressives on council, who could have all stood for mayor, all said, we think you'd be a good mayor. We won't stand for mayor. We will support you to be mayor. So on the Conservative side, there were probably 4 contenders, might have been 5. On the Progressive side, there was only me. So I had that wonderful support, and I was elected. So, yeah, so that's how that happened. And then once you're mayor, as an incumbent, it's easier to be re-elected. So I was re-elected the second time in 2012. And 2016, I thought, I've always been a believer in turnover, and I thought, I think I've had enough. I love it, but I don't want to stay another 4 years.
No.
I will step down. And Ron had retired 2 years before me, so it was time for me to go.
And you were doing 20-hour days, weren't
oh,
you?
And yes,
with
my week was
volunteer work and everything else.
My week as mayor was between 80 and 100 hours a week.
Wow.
Long hours. My choice. My choice. That's not all prescribed, but it was time to stop.
What were some of your most memorable events that happened during your time as mayor in this community?
Look, I think there's nothing more memorable than citizenship ceremonies.
Yeah.
When you see, you as mayor, I can do a citizenship ceremony. The state member can't, the federal member can't, or unless there's a special arrangement. I am the representative in the community to confer citizenship.
Right.
And to see my first one, I had a family of refugees, new arrivals, new settlers who'd come here from Sudan. They'd spent 10 years in a refugee camp in Kenya. To see what citizenship meant to them was spine-tinglingly moving. So that was one. I think there are lots of others. Recognising that we were a refugee welcome city was another. Reaching out and being part of officially welcoming and recognising our gay, lesbian, LGBTIQ community, having that recognised and seeing how that meant to the community was another one. So lots of others. I think reaffirming our sister city. You're standing on the shoulders of giants who've gone behind you, before you. So I don't know if you can actually see something that was just yours, that you felt, that I felt, this is what I've achieved. I've never felt that was me, but afterwards, of course, the opening of the new gallery was something that was very deeply personal to me, and I could see and be proud of an achievement that I had laid the groundwork for that had then happened. So, but look, every day there was something that made me feel very proud and humbled to be mayor. Whether it was a child who recognises you in the street, who says, you answered my letter when I wrote to you about why we needed a change to our bus route, or something simple that I'd perhaps forgotten about, but it had meant something to that child.
Exactly. And what about difficulties?
Lots
must
of
have
them.
seen quite a lot of difficulties.
Yeah, lots of them. The lots.
Yeah.
And I'm now a mentor for 14 mayors around the state. And there are common difficulties. Difficulties in managing relationships. Particularly, there's always a challenging relationship with a particular councillor. I had that. Trying all sorts of which ways to make that relationship work. Not always succeeding. No. That's always a challenge. Having a challenge with a state government or federal government is always a challenge, particularly if it comes to wrangling about grants and missing out are challenges. Having to say no to a community member, there's a role for a mayor that a councillor doesn't often have. A councillor can say, if say a community member says, look, I insist I want a footpath outside my house, I am tripping over or whatever, and a councillor can say, I will lobby on your behalf, I will do what I can. A councillor can go back and say, I really tried, but that damn council, I couldn't convince them to do it. A mayor can't do that. A mayor has to be able to say, I'm sorry, that's not on our priority list at this stage. We cannot deliver that for you. We have other things.
So you take the brunt.
I bear the brunt. So that role of a mayor is always difficult, but it's so important. You can't pussyfoot around those conversations. And that was difficult. There are other difficult things that were challenging about standing up to someone, to say, you know, I had people come to say to say, what you are doing is sending Lismore to hell in a handbasket because you are welcoming gay and lesbians in our community, and that's against God's will. And people who wanted to pray for me and our community, who said that I was ruining our city because of that. And at that stage I had to say, I believe you are wrong. We will never agree. I thank you for making representations to you, but I'm not going to change my position on this. So being strong about the things that are really important too were hard and challenging.
2017, you were awarded with an OEM for service to the local government and our community. How did that feel?
Oh, unbelievable.
Yeah.
It was awarded at the Queen's birthday in 2017. I'd been told about it a couple of months before, and I had to keep it secret, of course. I was going to be overseas when it was announced. But I was back for the ceremony, which was in September. It was very overwhelming.
And well deserved.
Well, thank you. No one, I think, really says that they believe they deserve it, because you are there doing things as an elected representative. You can't do any of those things alone. You've done them because you've had a community and a council who has
been with you
all the way. Mostly. But, you know, so it feels like you accept those things as the mayor, not as Jenny Dowell.
Yes,
you know,
right,
because if I wasn't mayor, that wouldn't have happened.
Okay.
You know, yes, there were parts of my role as a teacher of the deaf and other community things in there, but the predominant reason was that I've been there.
Now that you're not mayor, you're still so busy and you volunteer for many things. So tell us a little bit about that. You do tap with the ladies at Karuna. And what else do you do? Oh, you're acting. You're acting now. So coming up in the production of Still Magnolias.
I made a decision when I retired that I would have at least 3 months off. I put my Facebook page into hibernation for a while. I really turned off. I made some rules for myself before I stepped down that I would never comment publicly about council decisions. And lots of media wanted to contact me, and they did. What do I think about council's decisions now, or whatever? So you'll never hear that from me.
No.
I love the fact that you can watch live streaming of council meetings, and I must admit on a Tuesday evening at 6 o'clock, if I'm not doing anything, I might tune in and see how it's going. No one ever knows that I'm doing it, whereas if I went and sat up the back, you'd know. So I keep abreast of what council's doing to a certain extent, but I'll never, ever comment publicly about it. So I made those decisions, and I thought I'll have some time off and decide what I wanted to do. I wanted to do some voluntary work. I was willing to do some committee work, but I turned down lots of offers, and I said, give me 6 months before I accept any committee work. So I had a chance to think what I want to do. So what I'm now doing and what I've taken over in this role, I'm volunteer in several areas. I'll break it down to volunteering, committee work, patrons, and interest stuff. Because interest stuff is the acting. I'm doing some stuff that is just purely for me. Volunteering, I teach tap at Karuna every week to a group of, I've been doing that for 2.5 years, a group of predominantly women. There's been a couple of men in it. By nature, we've lost, because people have died, we've lost about 5 members over the 2.5 years. All the women are chair-bound bar one, who can use a wheelie walker for short distance. All the others are in wheelchairs. We've had women who are in Regency chairs, so they're laying down. We use the bottom of a Coke can, velcroed to the base of their slippers, makes a fabulous noise. Very basic steps. We've got a repertoire of about 60 songs, and we've done about 5 concerts, and we've got a concert coming up on Tuesday week. And we do a theme concert. So this one's Irish. So we do songs that they recognise, and most of the women can't tap and sing at the same time. And most of the women have dementia, but when the music starts, they remember the words.
Amazing.
And they can move their feet.
Yeah.
So although 2 of the women, even in the last couple of weeks, have stopped the ability to move their feet. So that's great. We have a cup of tea, we talk about all sorts of things. The conversation gets kept quite ribald at times. And then we go into a tap session and prepare for a concert. So I do that. I volunteer at the Red Cross tea rooms once a month. I've graduated to making the sandwiches, including toasted sandwiches. I'm not interested in learning until it's too complicated. So they were facing closure on a Monday if they didn't get booked more volunteers.
Yes, I remember.
So I put my name down. So I really love that. I volunteer at the Botanic Gardens on a Sunday afternoon. I'm trying to think where else I've volunteered.
And you're retired.
Yeah, I volunteer. I'm a committee member and an active volunteer with Relay for Life.
Yes.
And with Northern Rivers Rail Trails. So that's the part from the committee work, that's often volunteering by being at the car boot market on stalls, or at the beef week, or at other places.
Yes.
And the same with Relay for Life. So I'm then patron of about 7 organisations. The local Parkinson's support group, Jodie's Inspiration, Red Cross, the Base Hospital Auxiliary, whatever, I can't remember all of them at the moment. So patron. A lot of that is to do with publicising what those groups do, because they know I've got an active Facebook group. I'm on lots of committees, including Rail Trail, Relay for Life, the Northern Rivers Suicide Prevention Awareness and Support Group. I'm secretary there. I'm on the NORPA board, the Conservatorium board, and of several other committees. And then for my own interest, I also write monthly book reviews for the library, for their website, because I'm an active reader. I'm in a book club. I've taken up acting. I've taken up running. I do park run every week. What else do I do for interest? And I read, and yeah, that's about it. I was cooking, doing some demonstrations for cooking when there was a glut of citrus last
making
winter. Marmalades, and
Yeah.
I did Christmas pudding and Christmas cake making up at the YWCA. They were free community workshops, but there hasn't been as much citrus around this year, so that's not happening. I may or may not do Christmas cake and pudding later in the year. So, but I still have time for me. So
really,
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So there you go.
Your book club, you're still friends with the people that were in your book club many years ago. Is that right? You still meet up? And
Yes. Yeah. I started with the book club in 1998. So we meet monthly all year. And yeah, we set the year, the books we read for the year, and get together each month and read that month's book, and give it a score. There's a bit of wine and cake involved, and we meet at each person's house, and it's a great friendship. Well, I mean, in the 20 years, we've gone through deaths of family members. We've gone through divorce. We've gone through grandchildren, some joyous times. 3 of us in that time have had cancer.
I was going to ask you about that.
So,
that was 2008.
and one of the women is going through treatment at the moment. So it's a little bit like Still Magnolias, which is a group of 6 women who support each other through the good times and bad. That's what book clubs do. Plus I meet every school holidays with the group of women I did canteen with when our kids were at school. We meet every school holidays for lunch.
Long-standing.
And that's been going for 19 years.
Wow.
So, you know, the support groups women have, I think, are very important. But go ahead.
Absolutely. I was going to ask you about, because I just noticed recently you had your mammogram and it was clear. So that was good news. So what happened back in 2008?
I'd gone through my regular mammogram,
Yeah.
and this was in the lead up to the election when I was standing for mayor for the first time. And I can still remember pre-poll was down near the old Lover Coffee in Carrington Street, where the Repco, where Ishka
yes.
is now. That's about there was pre-poll, and I'd had my mammogram, and I got a phone call while I was handing out Jenny Dowell for mayor, Jenny Dowell. I had a phone call, and they said, we've got a vacancy, we'd like you to come back. I'd had the letter, that's right, I'd had a letter to say, something's not quite right, come back. And it did not occur to me in that letter that arrived a few days before that there was anything wrong, because I'd had callbacks before because the mammogram was unclear. I've had lumpy breasts, and it was always difficult to get an image. So it did not occur to me that this could have been a problem. So I got the letter, and I thought, yes, I'll make the appointment, which was after the election, about the Wednesday after the election. That's right, Wednesday. The election was going to be the Saturday, the mammogram callback was going to be the Wednesday. So they rang me the week before and they said, we've got a vacancy tomorrow, would you like to come in? So this is a week earlier. Would you like to come in? I said, no, I'm handing out Jenny Dowell for mayor, Jenny Dowell for mayor. No, I'm hanging out, I'll keep my normal appointment, thanks. Bye. Didn't think another thing of it. I'm so glad I did not, because I don't think I could have faced election day knowing I had breast cancer. Because election day's tough. People will say, I wouldn't vote for you if you gave me $1 million. If someone said to me that and I knew I had cancer, I would have cried. Whereas I was strong on that day because I didn't. Ignorance is bliss.
It is, isn't it?
So I went back on the Wednesday. The election I knew on the Sunday night. John Chan had conceded on the Sunday night, but it wasn't official. Monday night, I knew I was mayor. I think it was the Tuesday night I got the official call, and the Wednesday morning at 9:30 I had my mammogram. And they said, you've got a suspicious lump. I said, what does that mean? She said, you've got breast cancer. They did an ultrasound, that's right, wasn't it? That's right. They did a ultrasound and a biopsy on the spot and said, I went in alone because I wasn't expecting anything. And they said, would you like to speak to a social worker? Would you like to, this is then, a surgeon, etc. I said,
shock.
Yes. I felt really, really shocked. I didn't cry. I didn't cry. I talked to the surgeon, what does this mean? I was there for about 2 hours. I got to the front door and the volunteer there said, are you okay? As I was going to leave, across your Albert Street, she said, are you okay? I said, no. And I started to cry. And I pulled myself together as I'm a fairly stoic person. I crossed the road, I don't know how I wasn't hit by a car, my car was parked opposite. I got in the car, put the key in the ignition and turned on, and Richard Feidler was in the middle of conversations. So it was about 11:30, 2 hours later. And I don't know who he was talking to. I reckon I could find out because it was September the 17th, 2008. And as I turned it on, he said to the person he was interviewing, that must have been really tough. How did you cope with that? Or how did you go on?
Just at that moment?
At that moment. And the person said, I told myself, just get on with it. And that was like, that became my mantra. I drove home, tears were flowing. Ron was at home, I think. Ron was at home. And I walked in and I told him, and we cried.
Oh.
And then it was a matter of, how do I tell my kids? How do I tell my mum and dad? And then, how do I manage this? Because I'd just been elected mayor. There was no bloody way I was going to give up that.
Good girl.
So I didn't tell anyone for a couple of days until I told the people closest to me, those phone calls. And then I think the next week, the person at council who knew first was Shauna McIntyre. She hugged me when I arrived at council to congratulate me. And I whispered in her ear, I've got breast cancer. So I then had to manage, and I decided I would manage this. I would tell the general manager. I would plan when I would tell the councillors. The first meeting of council was these dates are drilled in my mind. The 30th of September. I wanted the councillors to feel the joy of being elected. We planned a pizza and party pie night for their kids. I said I want the kids to know, because we had new councillors, I want the kids to know where their mum or dad is going to spend the next 4 years. I want them to sit in the mayor's chair and have photos with mums and dads. Yes. I want it to be a celebration. Yeah. So Ron was there with me. We went through the celebration, and afterwards I said, now would all the councillors come back to my room, please? So they all came back in, and Ron was standing beside me, and I told them. So that was a Tuesday. I'd already arranged for the general managers to tell the staff Wednesday, and in the meantime I'd had 2 confidential interviews with the editor of the Northern Star and the editor of the Echo, because I didn't want the community to be saying she knew she had cancer, she stood, she's riddled with it, she's going to die. I didn't want those, so I was so methodical. So I sat down with those 2 editors and I gave them the full story with photos the Monday. And I said, you are not to publish it till the Thursday, because I want the councillors, the staff to know on the Wednesday. Yes. I don't want them to pick up the Northern Star and say, God, our mayor, I wanted them to know first, and then the community. The editor of the Northern Star at the time was a bit of a problem. She wanted to get the jump on and publish. And I did my lolly with her. I said, you are not to publish till a Thursday. You'll still come out before the Echo anyway, but I want to be on the Thursday. So that's how I managed it. And then went in a week later for my mastectomy and went to council for my next council meeting with my tubes under my jacket and under my robes. And I wore a long dress jacket, but under the robes as well. So I had drainage tubes in for about 2 weeks. No one knew. And then, you know, went home each day. Went home each day for a nap while I did about 4 months of chemo. So, yeah, that was it. Wore a wig because I didn't want people to look at me and think she's sick. Learned to draw on eyebrows, and when I lost mine, I chose a spunky reddish toned wig, and people actually said, who does Jenny Dowell think she is? She becomes mayor and she's got to dye her hair.
So I've always got to have some.
So there were some funny bits about, you know, I love the new height hairstyle, people not realising I had a wig. So, yeah, look, in retrospect I did it really well because I had something to occupy my mind, and lots of women don't, so I was lucky, really.
And so then afterwards you had the follow-ups, and now how many years later that you're clear?
Yeah, 7 years later I was allowed to graduate from my oncologist because I had stayed on a really aggressive oral medication. Made me sick. But in the end, I didn't know. In the end, he said, there's no evidence that staying on this drug for 10 years, which is the normal length of time you stay on an oral chemo, is any better than staying on for 7. So if you're happy to go off, I thought, yes. Yeah. You know, the side effects were awful for all those times. So then at 10 years, so September 2018, I graduated from my surgeon. So now I'm just back on annual mammograms. And I've had the mammogram and ultrasound only a couple of weeks ago. I got a text with, I haven't actually had the text to say in layman's terms it's all right. That's due about now. So they told me on the date all looks fine. Okay. So I'm hoping and assuming, I always think the best, I'm assuming it's all right. So if I put on Facebook next week, sorry folks, I misled you, I'll deal with it. But at the moment, all's right. So that's on the good boob. I've only got one. So that's the good boob, and I'm hoping she's all right, but we'll see.
Aww. Yeah. I don't know. I think that's what's the future for Jenny Dowell now. You've been amazing in this community, still are, still do so much for Lismore. I take my hat off to you because you have so many hats. But,
well, I love this place.
Yeah, no,
I love this place, and I was going to say I want to die here, but that sounds a bit too. After our last conversation, I don't want to die yet.
No, here. Not yet.
But I don't want to move away. I love this place. I'll continue doing as much as I can, for as long as I can, and I'll continue to be as involved as I can. I will continue. I mentor 14 mayors around the state. I'll continue to encourage particularly women to stand for local government, and I will help anyone of any political persuasion who is interested in getting some advice on how to go about that, how to start, what to do, you know, and how to get there, because our council should be representative of the community, so they should have younger people, they should have people of different ethnicities, lifestyles, sexualities, they should have equal gender, you know, ratios. They should be, you know, representatives. So I would say, don't ever think you can't do it. Honestly, it's a representative. You don't have to have special skills. You don't have to have special qualifications. There are things that would enhance your ability to be on council, but you already have those things.
Right. And you're running. You're doing a lot of running.
Yeah, I
very fit now.
Not as fit as I'd like to be right at the moment. I rolled this ankle on Christmas Day, and it's still a little tender. So I'm doing more walking than running. But I ran. My last achievement in running was running 10k at the last Dowell Fun Run, and I did that in 1 hour and 3 minutes, which isn't bad.
Awesome.
I can run 5k in just over 31 minutes, but I haven't achieved that time for a little while, so I need to get back to that. Yeah, get my ankle back. But I'm confident I'll get running. Whether I get to 31 minutes, I don't know. But yeah, I'll run. I hadn't run since I was 11, but I can run now. I don't know, but I think, you know, you go back to your family. My family was very community-minded. My dad wasn't so much, but my mum was very involved in the community about inclusion and not judging people. I can certainly remember we had a group of a gypsy family who came and went to our local primary school, which is only a 2-teacher school, and many of the other kids would look down on that family. And I can still remember my mother saying, they're a family just like us. They deserve to be treated fairly. So I can remember that kind of, and this was in a conservative, rural community in Gippsland, in Victoria. So I can still remember that. But I think becoming a teacher, you know, I mean, teaching is full of lefties, frankly, and public school teaching is even fuller of people who want fairness for kids. So, you know, I think it was my teaching background, and then the community work I did. We lived in South Melbourne for the 10 years before we moved up here. I was involved in my preschool, and the preschool was predominantly filled with kids of single mums, very young single mums on welfare who lived in the high-rise commission flats. And I got to know them, their struggles, their hopes for their kids. I got to know and really love them. And I think that was just the community, and that was then the school. Although in the street we lived, I'll tell you this story which shocked the pants off me. The family at the end of our little street had 3 boys who went to private private school the other side of the Yarra, really expensive place. And when... In Kew, yes, in Kew. And when I was pregnant and I went into labour with our son, they very kindly took our daughter for the night. And she was 2.5. I think before that we'd had a dinner party there at their house, and all the local toffee people, we were introduced to them because we were new in the area. We were introduced to them, and out of course, the conversation, where is Georgina going to go to school?
At 2.
At 2. And we said, the local primary school. And of course, eyebrows were raised. So, after our daughter went to stay there the night when our son was born, the next day in the street, the son, the middle son, who was only about 10, said to me, how come you're only sending your daughter, Georgie, to that school? And so it had obviously been a conversation in the family. So it was really, really, that dug our heels in even more. But so I think experiences have really grown up, and then experiences doing that voluntary work that I'd always done, helping build I was involved in a community built Robert Leather's playground. I don't know if anyone knows, Robert Leathers was a fellow from America who designed adventure playgrounds with communities as they wanted, and then the communities fundraised and actually physically did the building. So I was part of that movement too. So a lot of community, I was chair of a short-term foster care agency. So lots of those things, just, I guess, time builds up and you get that sense of what's fair and what people deserve, and that it shouldn't be based on, you know, where you were born, the family you were born into, how much money you earn, what your postcode is, all that stuff, you know, so ingrained deeply. I loved it. I remember my time on council, after my first council meeting. I asked Ron not to be there because I would have been nervous if he was sitting in the gallery. So we had our first council meeting, proper council meeting, not the one just where we elected a deputy mayor and all the kids were there and then they went home. Our first proper council meeting. So I'd been diagnosed with cancer. I'm not sure if I think I'd even had my surgery. But I came home to Ron and I said, I've come home. And I didn't mean I've driven in the driveway, I've parked the car. I meant, this is where I belong. This is what all my life's experiences had led to. And this has what has prepared me to do this job. I feel ready, and this is where I want to be. And that was a really strong feeling when I was elected as a councillor. And that then went on. So I loved the opportunity to be out in the community. I think I was active in the community before I was mayor. But it's like, if the community is like an iceberg, as a councillor you're seeing, as a community member you're seeing the top third. As a councillor you're seeing probably 2/3. As a mayor you're seeing almost all of it. Because I was invited and I went to groups that I didn't ever know existed. People stopped me to talk about issues that I'd never heard of before. So the variety, I can't think of a better job in the world, honestly, with so much variety. Much better than any level other sphere of government, because you're over so many different issues in a day. You could be talking about 10, 12 vastly different topics in a day. So there's no reason why anyone would ever be bored in local government. So, this is a fabulous interviewer. We